Thank you for attending and for being here after lunch. We thank AUIS, which I'm proudly a board member of, for organizing this, and we wish the university a lot of success. We have a very important panel here. We've been talking about politics, practically, and religion and border relationships for the past couple of days. And I, coming from finance and business, think this is more important than anything we discussed. If we can imagine this forum 20 years from now, and what will be the subject being discussed. Forum 22, if we do things correctly, we'll be discussing art, philosophy, effect of religion on psychology, etc. If we do things wrongly, we won't be discussing anything because there will be no Sulaimani forum in 22 years. I'm afraid from the business point of view, I think we're not doing things right. The idea of a centralized economy is bankrupt. What we're doing today, what we have done for the past 10 years, is export oil to import yogurt. That cannot last. The population is growing, it cannot last. The other day, we opened the beautiful new hotel in Sulaimani, the Grand Millennium Hotel. In the opening of the hotel, His Excellency Shwan Barzani said that our government should not be asked to provide employment for everyone. No government in the world is asked to provide employment for everyone. His Excellency Fuad Hussein yesterday mentioned that the era of centralized directed economies are gone. I completely agree with him. I would like to add to that centralization, whether it's Baghdad, Erbil, Sulaimaniya, or Kirkuk, has to be gone. The idea of private sector and the unalienable right of everyone to pursue happiness is enshrined in the American Constitution. I wish one of my politicians wrote that, but no, it was written by Thomas Jefferson. That simple idea today is $13 trillion economy. However we agree or disagree with the American policies, they gave us the car, they gave us the plane, they gave us electricity, and to all of you young people in the back, they gave us the iPad. And this university is called American University of Iraq. So there is something they have done correctly there. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 60% of the population that is under the age of 20. Okay? We need to create jobs. And it is not, I repeat, it is not the government that will be able to do that. It is the private sector. So without going too much more into it, I would like to go into my panel, which presents people who actually invested in Iraq. The realities of these investments in Iraq, what they have suffered from investing in Iraq, and why the government does not provide good means for investment. But first, we'd like to go with a success story to Kak Faruk and his investment in the region. I've known Kak Faruk for 15 years, and the first time I met him, he walked into my office in Istanbul with Kakiwa, and he said, I'm going to do a mobile operators in Iraq. This is year 1999. To say the least, I laughed. Iraq was under American sanctions. How could you start a mobile operator in Iraq? I never laugh at anything Kak Faruk says anymore, however crazy it sounds, because he can do it. So Kak Faruk, please talk about your success stories.
قصة أساسية أتكلم عربي، عربيتي أحسن من الإنجليزية. أستاذ شوان يمكن يترجم لي.
كون ترجمة كان له.
قصة آسيا سيل قصة الحقيقة قصة طويلة، وتمثل نجاح مستثمرين عراقيين في مرحلة عصيبة من مراحل الوضع السياسي في العراق في سنوات ما بعد 1995 و 96. بدأنا بأعمال بسيطة في مجال الاتصالات، وفي سنة 1999 وقبل ذلك الحقيقة أنا شفت أول مرة الموبايل في لندن. كنت في راقد في مستشفى لإجراء عملية باي باس في القلب بالتأكيد. شفت الموبايل، ما كنت شايف الموبايل، فشجعني الموبايل والاهتمام بالموبايل ودور الموبايل في الاتصالات وفي جميع أمور الحياة أن أبحث عن الموبايل وكيفية البدء. اتصلنا من المستشفى، أنا اتصلت ببعض الشركات، أكثرهم رفضوا، لأن العراق كان اكو حصار اقتصادي على كردستان وحصار اقتصادي على العراق. كردستان الحقيقة كان علينا حصارين، فكان من الصعب، وقسم الحقيقة كانوا يستهزئون بالحديث عن الموبايل في كردستان والعراق. ذكر الأخ شوان وهو كان الحقيقة مساعدا لنا كأخ وصديق طبعا. فبدأنا بالاتصال بتركسل. تركسل دزولنا للاتصال الشخص الرابع أو الخامس، ما أدري من هالنوع. فهم أيضا ما صار عليه أي اتفاق. اتجهنا فيما بعد باختصار إلى شركة كندية أمريكية، شركة صغيرة كان اسمها تيلوس. فاشتغلنا على هذا الموضوع وقدرنا أن نستورد أجهزة ومعدات لنيتورك صغير. بعد ذلك صار من 2001 بدأنا بالاتصالات بشركات كبيرة. أول شركة اتصلنا بشركة هواوي الصينية، فأيضا هم كانوا خايفين من الوضع في العراق وعدم قبول السلطة ذاك الوقت بجلب معدات اتصالات بالأساس إلى كردستان لأن كان حكومة كردستان المحلية بالتأكيد. توسع العمل بعد الحقيقة بعد سقوط النظام البائد، وصارت الاتصالات قوية مع شركة هواوي. وأنا الحقيقة أبين فشيء مهم جدا ذاك الوقت، أن ناس أنا وزملاء لي عدد قليل كنا الموبايل كنا نتأثر ذاك الوقت لو مال الملك، لو مال الأمير، لو مال العوائل الكبيرة في مصر والكويت والسعودية والهاي. فدائما أنا أشجع الزملاء والأصدقاء للشجاعة والجرأة في العمل، وبمبالغ قليلة تمكنا وديون تمكنا من استيراد الموبايل عن طريق تركيا، ومن تركيا إلى كردستان. هاي حديث طويل، بس آسيا سيل هسه تعتبر شركة آسيا سيل هسه أقوى شركة وأهم شركة اتصالات في العراق. ومن ناحية الأرباح الشركة الوحيدة اللي أرباحنا واضحة وجيدة. ومن ناحية الكفرج احنا آسيا سيل نغطي بال197 من الأراضي المسكونة في العراق. وكذلك آسيا سيل هسه تساهم في الأسواق، ولأول مرة وقبل عام واحد دخلنا في سوق الأوراق المالية وكأول شركة اتصالات ولحد الآن. والاكتتاب الأول اللي قمنا به كان اكتتاب أولي ناجح، وكان الأول الاكتتاب الأول منذ 2008 في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، والأول في العراق في التاريخ، لأن خلال فترة قصيرة تمكنا من بيع جميع الأسهم. آسيا سيل تعني بالنسبة لنا شركة وطنية وبجهود وطنية. جلبنا بالتأكيد أول مرة، وهذه النقطة مهمة جدا، الخبرة والأموال. الخبرة ما كان أكو خبرة اتصالات في العراق. تمكنا من استيراد الخبرات قبل الأموال وقبل الأجهزة، وحاليا نقدر نقول أن المسائل الأساسية في آسيا سيل اللي عندنا 11 مليون مشترك ونغطي كل العراق، إدارة عراقية فنيا وإداريا وحتى تجاريا. قصة آسيا سيل قابلة للإطالة، ولكن أنا في قضايا أخرى كانت على الطاولة، موضوع الاستثمار في كردستان وفي العراق. أنا وشركتنا فاروق جروب وزملاء آخرين أيضا من آسيا سيل ومن الشركات الأخرى نعتبر نفسنا المستثمرين أو المستثمرين الأوائل في العراق حجما ونوعية. اهتمينا بالصناعات، ولأول مرة في كردستان قمنا بإعادة تأهيل معمل سمنت طاسلوجة كأول عمل في العراق بعد سقوط النظام. وبعد معمل طاسلوجة أنشأنا معمل آخر ويمثل أكبر خط في الشرق الأوسط، في خط كخط واحد لينتج 7500 طن سمنت. واستمرنا في الاستثمار، ودائما أمامي المهم جلب الخبرات قبل الأموال وقبل الأجهزة. وتمكنا من فتح تريننج سنتر في شركة آسيا سيل، وتخرجوا من هالمركز أكثر من 600 واحد في مختلف مجالات، من فنية وماركتينج وسيلز وجميع المجالات. أنا أقدر أقول نحن نساهم ونساهم وللأخير في بناء بلدنا. ونحن، أنا بالذات أتكلم باسمي، ليس لي أي مشروع خارج كردستان، فقط آسيا سيل اللي في كل العراق. واهتمامي الأساسي في محافظة السليمانية ومدينة السليمانية لافتقارها إلى الكثير من المشاريع المهمة. ونحن بنينا أكثر من 10 أو بين 10 و15 مشروع، أكثرها مشاريع صناعية وسياحية وزراعية. أرجو أن نتمكن من الاستمرار في هذا العمل. بالتأكيد بالنسبة للاستثمار لا يجب أن أؤشر أن قانون الاستثمار في كردستان وقانون الاستثمار في العراق قانون جيد على الطريق الصحيح. الاستثمار يساعد المستثمرين بشكل جيد، وأنا أتكلم في استثمار كردستان وبالذات استثمار السليمانية، بعيدين بالأساس من الروتين القاتل، الروتين الموجود في جميع دوائر الدولة، الروتين اللي يولد الفساد المالي والإداري. فإن شاء الله نتمكن من التوسع إلى مناطق بغداد وجنوب العراق في مشاريع صناعية مختلفة. وبنينا نحن مستشفى، هذا المستشفى يعتبر هذا المستشفى الجيد ونوعيا أحسن مستشفى في الشرق الأوسط، كما يعترف بهذا جميع الزوار من أطباء ومن ناس فنيين. المستشفى أملنا أن نفتتح مستشفى آخر في بغداد أو في البصرة في الأشهر القريبة القادمة، ليعم هذا الخير كما يقولون جميع مناطق العراق. شكرا.
Thank you, Faruk. First, I'd like to plug in our firm. Rabee Security actually did the Asia Cell deal in Iraq, which was the largest deal in the Middle East in the past 5 years. But now, from very happy investment to one foreign investment that is not so happy. I was sitting in my office when Esra and her father came to tell me that they have invested in Baghdad. I was very happy to hear somebody actually has put money in Baghdad, a foreigner has put money in Baghdad, in a factory. And the more they spoke, the worse the story became. It is the first investment in Baghdad that actually got a MEGA insurance. MEGA is political insurance by the IFC, and this is the first project that got that. However, they actually wanted to sell the investment. So, Esra, please tell us your experience.
Well, definitely the success of Asia Sahel will be hard to follow, but this will provide a different perspective. Can you hear me? Okay. I said definitely the success of Asia Sahel is very difficult to follow, but this will provide a different perspective. I want to state, first of all, that our experience has been mainly with the central government of Iraq and with Baghdad, and we have not had any experience here in the KRG, so please keep that in mind. I'll start with how, first of all, this project came about. I work with my family, with my father. We are doing chemicals and petrochemicals and oil products trading, and we have been doing that for about 35 years. Since the 80s, our company had been supplying Iraq with raw materials for industry as well as petrochemical products. So we were quite familiar with the country, and we liked working here in the past. And after the war, we said, okay, let's go back. Our contacts also reached out to us, and we said, okay, what can we do now? And we looked at the investment law, which had been issued at the time, and we met with the investment authority, and we decided to do something in manufacturing. We said, everybody is trying to sell something to Iraq from Turkey, but we need to go one step further and maybe try to do something in Iraq. This will be good for business, and it will be good also for the country. We looked into several things, and coming from the petrochemical sector, we decided to manufacture PET preforms. PET preforms are, they look like little test tubes. They are purchased by beverage companies. The beverage companies blow these into bottles, the water bottles or soft drink bottles that you use, and then they fill them. We thought, let's go ahead with this. Water is important. We obtained, as Shwan said, political risk insurance from MEGA. We said this will cover us in case of violence or any political issue in the country. We were the first ones to get political risk insurance. At the time, this was quite new, but it was quite interesting for us as investors. And we went ahead. We set up the factory. It was operational by the second half of 2010. The first lines were installed, and the project was actually in 2 phases. We had some delays with the equipment and all of that, but okay, we start in 2010 with the first part of the project. At the time, this was really, I think, one of the few projects that were directly investing in Iraq, and we said, are we crazy? But no, there were several advantages, we thought, to investing in Iraq. The first is that, drinking water is necessary and beverages are necessary and demand will be there under any political or economic situation. So it's quite a stable product. The second is that there were almost no local production of these preforms. So there wasn't so much competition. We knew that stability and prosperity would increase, and the youth, the demographics in Iraq would lead to the consumption of a lot of beverages. So we said, okay, these are really good strategic points. We found a good site close to Baghdad in a secured zone by the Ministry of Trade, so location is good. We imported the best equipment from Canada. Machinery is good, no problems, hopefully, with the machinery. And you know, power generation was a key issue, so we got what we thought, you know, the best generators. We don't want to have any problems. So all of that looked quite positive. And the only competition, in fact, was the preforms that were being imported mainly from Turkey. And you know, we looked at the economics. Producing them in Iraq was going to give us quite a beneficial situation compared to the imports. So we went ahead. And you know, this is all the great part, the good part of the story. But what did we face when we got to working on the ground? Somehow we found it very difficult to find good Iraqi partner to work with. We didn't have the same business ideas, the same understanding. We were thinking longer term. So at the end, we decided to buy out all of our partners, and we decided to stay on our own. The lack of power supply really was problematic for us. Even though we had, you know, sufficient generators, it's very costly. Getting the fuel is quite expensive. The quality, you know, stopping a factory is the worst thing that you can do in production. It affects all your costs, and this has to happen quite often still because of the lack of power. So. Other than that, one of the problems was also the lack of trained professionals. We couldn't, for example, find people who spoke English, but who were also good at accounting and these sorts of things. So we decided to hire people who spoke English, and we trained them ourselves. You know, we brought people from Turkey, technical people, commercial people, you know, from time to time, we did go to the government with some of the problems we had, and whoever we went to in the senior government was very helpful, tried to do their best, and we thank them. And in fact, they did maybe resolve some of our problems, but you know, speaking from someone who's senior, then the implementation has to be done by the more junior people who need to work on the things. And we found that there is really a lack of institutional capacity and a lack of knowledge and institutional background to be able to do some of even the basic things. So, and last but not least, you know, the security was especially around 2009 and 10 a concern for the expats who were working for us, a cost to have them, to provide security for them. And it's unfortunately becoming a concern again with the latest surge in violence. Where are we now? What have we learned from this? You know, I cannot stress enough the importance of a local partner. I think it's not evident to find a good local partner right away, but maybe it makes things easier. I'm seeing that maybe we were too early. I see that things are progressing now. The markets are developing. People are doing much better as far as trading, as far as banking relations and using the banks and the infrastructure. Consumer use is increasing. For example, in the beverage industry, you know, where we deal on a daily basis, we really see a move from small producers to larger and more established producers who have better machinery, who are, I mean, Iraqi people are really investing, and we hope that this will continue. Right now, where we are at this point in the project actually is quite important for us. We have not, as I said in the beginning, implemented the second phase of the project. The second phase will actually make the project much more profitable due to the economics. But, you know, we are not sure whether to go forward because we don't see the problems necessarily being resolved right away, and we're not sure whether we'll be able to get to the full potential that the project has. So on one hand, and there are Iraqi companies interested to buy the factory. So on one hand, we are thinking, okay, we, cash out, we leave, and we leave this to Iraqis, and they can probably work better on this. On the other hand, especially thanks to this mega insurance, we have foreign investors who want to invest in us because they say, you're a good intermediate compromise for us. You understand Western business, so we want to invest with you. But it is a question whether we really feel confident that we can grow this. And I think time will tell. So I'll conclude with that.
Good. I think everybody from the government is very apologetic for all your problems, but let's hope that they could solve something. Esra and her family from Turkey did not have to invest in Iraq, but they chose to. My next guest, Ziad, they actually have a mandate to invest in Iraq, and they have a lot of money. IFC is the private arm of the World Bank Group, and they have, I think, I don't know how much, I'm not going to say it because I hear different numbers, but a lot of money to invest in Iraq, into businesses, private businesses. Yet, they're facing problems giving money to Iraq. So I would like to, Ziad, I think he has a presentation, so he's going to go to the podium.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to thank the American University for offering me this opportunity. And just going through my presentation quickly, I would like to start with an introduction of IFC and what we do, our activities in Iraq, and for the sake of time, I'll try to go through them quickly. Then I will focus on our strategy on Iraq. You mentioned we have a mandate to invest. Our mandate is to invest in projects that are profitable. It doesn't have to be in a specific country. So it is opportunities that present themselves. So I will talk about our strategy and the focus in our strategy. And then I will finish by talking about the challenges that are facing international investors like IFC in investing in Iraq. The World Bank Group has 5 different organizations. You have the World Bank for Reconstruction, which provide loans and technical assistance and grants to government. IFC is the arm of the World Bank that deal with the private sector. We already mentioned MIGA, our multilateral investment guarantee agencies, and there is other agencies in the bank. The World Bank Group is owned by 181 countries, and I'm happy to say that Iraq was among the 40 countries that signed on the establishment of the World Bank Group back in 1945. So Iraq is an establishing country. What does IFC do? IFC is the only global multilateral institution that is focused, as I mentioned, exclusively on the private sector. We are the global leader in private sector development, and we are the largest investor in emerging market. Our investment exceeds $45 billion. We facilitate transfer of knowledge, we bring expertise, and we introduce best industry practice when we get involved in an investment. IFC is highly decentralized with over 100 offices in 86 countries. When IFC look at an investment, we really look at the developmental impact of the project we're dealing with before we even look at the profit of the project, because we are the arm of the World Bank. We focus also on market pricing policies. So basically, we try not to compete with the private sector. Our role is not really to put the private sector out of business. So we follow market pricing. Our relationship with our clients is long-term. When we go into an investment, we're looking at 10 to 12 years partnership. Our role is counter-cyclical. When usually investors leave the market, like the financial crisis in 2009, we usually come in. We take risk when we involve in those markets, but it's definitely calculated risk. And by the way, we do not accept government guarantee in our investment. IFC has two arms. It has the advisory arm and the investment arm. Under the advisory arm, with the accumulated knowledge that IFC had for the last 50 or 60 years, we advise in 4 main areas. One is access to finance, where we also advise central banks. And with our advisory, by the way, we deal with both public and private sector. So we advise central bank, private banks, insurance companies, and so on. Investment climate where we try to help countries identify bottlenecks and challenges that investors face to invest in any country, and we try to improve the investment climate. PPP, where we are the only international organization that work on the bankability of a private-public partnership. We take the deal to the market. For example, Amman Airport is one of the projects that IFC have dealt with. Egypt, we have Cairo Wastewater is one of our PPP projects. Alexandria Hospital is one of them. Sustainable businesses is where we give advice on something like green code for buildings and so on. On the financial side, we give long-term loans. We could go into equity shares, and we provide guarantees. And also through our AMC, our asset management company, we could also do asset management. IFC portfolio so far in Iraq is around $700 million. We have 10% equity share in the Credit Bank of Iraq. We have 29 million loan for the Erbil Rotana. We put 15 million with the Erbil Rotania, which was the first 5-star hotel in Iraq. And we extended that by another 21 million for a Rotana Arjan, also in Kurdistan. We invested $135 million with Gulf Tainer. It's an Iraqi-Emirati company. It runs container berths in the Qasr port. We have, our largest investment is with Zain, Iraq. We have $400 million in a syndication with Zain. We have a partnership with Lafarge, so we invested 50 million with the Faruk group also in the Bazian cement factory, and 75 million in the Karbala cement factory. We also got a 10% share in the commercial bank of Iraq. Our target investment in the coming 3 years is to invest between $800 and $1 billion. Knowing that usually IFC direct investment does not exceed 20% of the total size of a project, we should be able to mobilize around $5 billion in investment for Iraq. Our main focus in working in a country like Iraq is to focus on the non-oil sector, because the oil sector unfortunately does not create jobs. So if we are looking for developmental impact in our strategy, we're trying to focus on the non-oil sector. Also, I mentioned all our investment, most of them are with foreign investors. So in our strategy, we are trying to focus on the Iraqi local investor, and we focus more on south-to-south investment. Our area of focus for the investment is power, gas, agriculture, banking, transportation. So basically, anything related to the reconstruction of Iraq, including cement, steel, and so on. Now talking about investing in Iraq. Why would anybody come and invest in Iraq? The way we look at it, that in Iraq there is opportunities, but there is challenges. Looking at opportunities, Iraq's current GDP budget is around 130 billion. An increasing percentage of that budget is going for investment, which offer big opportunities. It's a healthy economy. There is a stable inflation rate. There is an increase in the foreign direct investment coming to the country. There is substantial upside potential for investors coming to Iraq now, as long as they manage risk properly. And government is keen also to support the private sector. Now on the negative side, I still have 1 more minute. There is poor and legal regulatory framework, lack of transparency. Tesla already mentioned that there is a serious challenge in identifying local Iraqis with the proper background to work with companies like IFC. The World Bank Group did an investment climate assessment in Iraq, which basically we do a big survey and we ask investors about the challenges that are they facing in Iraq. As Tesla already mentioned, you notice that electricity is the #1 priority. In fact, the political instability, corruption come after that. Then access to finance, and then you will see like number 13 or 14 is the legal and regulatory framework. So basically, I want to focus now on the challenges that we are facing in dealing with Iraqi investors. The first challenge is what we call an investor due diligence. If you want to partner with anybody, you need to know who is your partner. And this is a challenge in Iraq. We need to make sure that we are not dealing with politically exposed people. We are not dealing with fronts, and this is something that we face all the time. We need to know the source of wealth, so we need to make sure that we are dealing with a legitimate private sector company. And we take our reputational risk really serious, and this is why we give this a priority. So investigating the investors that we want to deal with is a big challenge. The second type of challenges we face is what I called lack of knowledge in international practice. I have an investor who called me. He said he wants to come and see me. He's in Zaho. I was in Erbil. He wants to drive 3 hours to see me. I send him a list of the things that we need. I say basically, if I want to look at a project, I need a concept note. I need a feasibility study, a financial model. The guy come to see me with a handwritten paper, 2 pages for a $20 million investment. And I think he expected to get it checked by the end of that meeting. Doesn't work this way, unfortunately. So having the basic knowledge of how to prepare a good feasibility study, I'm talking about audited account also. If we want to deal with somebody, we need to know exactly their financial capabilities. And the only way to do it is to have audited account. Nobody audits their account in Iraq. And in fact, it's worse. It's the opposite. They give you audited account where they are losing money. And you will tell them, how do you want me to invest with you? And they say, well, we have 2 sets. This is for the taxes, but I have the real set of account. Anyway, I'm out of time here. I would like to thank you. I would like to say that IFC is here for business, and we are ready to contribute to the development and reconstruction of Iraq. Thank you.
Ziad, you can depend on firms like me to bring you the good deals, and then...
Sure.
We have audited financials, so...
You're rare.
Finally, I would like to introduce Philip Khoury. Rabee Securities, my firm, have been very, very successful in one thing: attracting foreign capital into the Iraqi stock exchange. I used to be one of the fund managers who invested in weird countries where nobody else can go. And the hedge fund managers that actually invest in the Iraqi stock exchange are that caliber. They go to places like Iraq, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, Mongolia. Right? Philip was credited with starting the research firm or research arm of EFG Hermes of Egypt, that EFG became the most successful investment bank in the region. He quit EFG, I think, at the right time, just before Egypt was going down the hill, and started Impera Capital. He has a fund that invests in the Iraqi stock exchange. He also has a fund that invests in Mongolia. And he will give us a little bit why, from the perspective of what portfolio investor, investing in the Iraqi stock exchange could be very profitable. Philip?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to split my presentation into 3 parts. The first part, I'll just summarize what investors look for when they invest in a stock market in an emerging market. The second is I'll go through why people might want to invest in Iraq and what attracts people to the ISX. And lastly, I'm going to go through what can be done to improve the attractiveness of the Iraqi capital markets. Okay, so first question is, why have an equity market? Well, the purpose of an equity market is to provide a forum for companies to raise equity capital. If you don't have an equity market, it's difficult to raise large amounts of equity, right? You're limited to the debt markets. Why attract foreign institutions? Well, foreign institutions are the most demanding type of investor. If you can attract foreign institutions, you can attract any type of investor. So what do institutions look for? Well, in an ideal world, they look for a stable and improving political environment. They look for a stable and improving economic environment. They look for a sizable market. The larger the market, the more scope there is for growth for the companies that are listed on that market. They look for a reliable framework for ownership and trading. There's no point having a fantastic opportunity and not knowing whether the shares belong to you or whether you'll get your money back. And lastly, they look for quality companies. They want companies that will be able to exploit the growth opportunities in that country. So in the investment world, we have 4 general categories of markets. You have developed markets. These include Canada, US, Western Europe, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and that's about it. You have emerging, and that goes anywhere from China, India, Brazil, right down to Egypt. You have frontier markets, which are a sort of a mini version of emerging markets, less liquid, less big, less efficient. And then you have markets that are considered to be off-index, i.e., they're not really worthy of inclusion in the frontier index. And this includes Iraq, actually. So Iraq today is an ex-index country, but is fully capable of making it into the frontier category. So why invest in Iraq? Well, what makes Iraq particularly interesting is that today it's producing, its daily production is actually very low relative to its potential, relative to its reserves. So according to the IEA, according to the IEA, Iraq could be producing anywhere between 4 million barrels a day and 9 million barrels a day by 2020. Let's say it's 6 million barrels a day. That's about twice what it's producing today. Now, for a low-cost oil producer to be able to double production, to be able to add 3 million barrels a day is incredible in today's world. No other country can do that, perhaps, except Iran. So also what makes Iraq very interesting is that despite all the political problems that we've had in the last 10 years, Iraq has managed to increase oil output from 2 million barrels a day in 2006 to about 3.2 today. And the reason for that is actually that the oil reserves are based in politically stable parts of the country, the Deep South and the Far North. And this is what makes Iraq attractive to people despite the noise, the bad political noise that we hear, the violence and so on and so forth. So Ziad touched on this. Also what makes Iraq very interesting is that growth for the next 5 years is going to be anywhere between 6 and 10% real, according to the IMF. Iraq is forecast to run fiscal surpluses, current account surpluses for the next 5 years. Debt is coming down relative to GDP, reserves are going up, inflation is low, interest rates are fairly low for an emerging market, and the currency is more or less pegged to the dollar. So let's look at the Iraqi stock market. The market has significantly outperformed frontier markets and seems insensitive to domestic security uncertainty. So if you look at the bottom right-hand chart, since the middle of 2002, despite the increase in violence, especially in the last 9 months of last year, the market has continued going up. Now, liquidity in the market is quite tight. I mean, looking at $1 to $2 million a day, which is low. Also, choice is effectively limited to Asia-Sal, the banking sector, and one beverage distributor. That's your real choice in this market. It's a fairly limited market. So if you're going to invest in Iraq, you really have to invest in the banking sector. So I thought it would be useful to show you why one might want to invest in the banking sector. Iraq has the lowest level in absolute terms of private sector deposits in the region. So the absolute level of deposits belonging to the private sector is lower than countries like Oman, like Jordan, and much lower than other countries that have the same sort of hydrocarbon endowment as Iraq. So despite Iraq being one of the 4 largest countries in the region, and you can see that on the sort of red circles on the left-hand chart, and this is also reflected in the fact that credit relative to GDP is extremely low. It's below 10%. And again, it's the lowest in the entire region. This is also reflected in a very low level of branches for the country's size. So you've got approximately 1 branch for every 34,000 people. Compare that to Oman, which is 1 for every 6,000, Lebanon, 1 for every 4,000. So this leads to a situation which is illustrated on the right-hand side, where you have a man carrying a huge bag of cash. Okay? Now, I've never seen that anywhere else in the world. Okay? But this is a frequent sight in Iraq, where people carry literally potato sacks of cash. So obviously, in 10 years' time, this isn't going to exist anymore. These sorts of transactions will happen through the banking system. It's all well and good to have a small banking sector, but is it growing? And the answer is yes, it is. In 2007, deposits in the private banks were only $2 billion. In 2012, they hit $7.5 billion. So you're looking at an annual growth rate of 33%. This is very high. Another thing that's interesting about the Iraqi banking sector is that it's actually very low risk. You put the 2 words together, Iraq and banking, and low risk, it just doesn't work. But it does. Why? Because actually banks don't lend a lot. They only lend around 30% of their deposits. And also their equity base relative to their loans is, I mean, normally in an emerging market, banks will lend 5 times their equity base, 6 times their equity base. In Iraq, they lend less than 1 times their equity base. So this is a very embryonic banking sector. Okay, this leads us on to the last part, which is what can we do to improve the investing environment in Iraq? Well, politics, economics, and size, those are given to us. We can't do much about that. But infrastructure and attracting better companies to the market, we can. Okay? So first thing is to focus on the plumbing, okay? The plumbing of the market. So custody. Global custody is a must for Iraq to graduate to frontier market status and to be taken seriously as a capital market. Today, if you own shares in Iraq, they're held by a subsidiary of the Iraqi Stock Exchange. But what we mean by global custody is that those shares should really be held by Bank of New York, by Citi, by anyone who you designate should hold those shares, so that a foreign investor feels secure in their ownership. Second thing, settlement. Today, if I want to buy shares in Iraq, I have to wire it to a broker, and from when the money arrives at the broker to when it's spent on shares, we take broker risk. So if the broker goes under, if the broker is dishonest, we lose our money, right? The way it should work is that we use the broker, but the money does not go through the broker, so we don't have to take broker risk. Liquidity. If you're an investor in Bank of Baghdad in July 2013, and you subscribe to the rights issue, you would not have been able to trade. So let's say you own $100 in Bank of Baghdad. For 7 months, you would not have been able to trade 30% of your shares because they were effectively frozen. So it's only in February 2014 that we were able to trade our shares in Bank of Baghdad. That's what we mean by improving liquidity conditions. It doesn't happen in other countries. Why does it happen in Iraq, right? Listing rules. Today, if you're a company, you're a good company, and you want to list on the market, it's difficult. In countries like Iraq, the regulator prefers to have a greenfield project where they know that $100 million is coming to the project, that the stock is being valued at $100 million, and they list all well and good. But the problem with a greenfield project is it tends to be higher risk than an existing company, than a running concern. The problem with the running concern is that it's more difficult to value. So the regulator feels more comfortable with valuing a greenfield than valuing a going concern. Whereas for an investor, it's much better to invest in a going concern, even if the valuation is uncertain. Anyway, it's up to them to decide on the valuation, right? So the listing rules have to change somewhat. And lastly, governance, financial transparency. It's important to have accounts audited by a known auditor, preferably one of the big four. Insider dealings. Insider dealings have to be regulated. So if large shareholders, board members, senior management trade in the shares, it has to be disclosed, and there have to be rules managing that process. Management of conflicts. Companies that have a large number of minority shareholders that have weak rights should really have independent board members. So, this should be instituted. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. When I introduced Philip, I told you this bunch thinks differently, and that's a proof. So they see, a lot of the fund managers see the opportunity where others see disaster, and they push the market that way. I will open, I have a few questions from Twitter, but I will open also the questions, the floor for question and answer. But let me just first go with this question. It says, the KRG investment law provides investors with 10 years tax-free. Is there fine print? It's asked by, I think, a journalist from the investing group. I can answer this one very softly. As an investor, I get very paranoid when a government tells me it's tax-free. Because how does a government make money without charging taxes? So whenever I hear tax-free, I would like to see what's hidden. Now, if you tell me there's a percentage of tax, I can put it in the financial projections of my deal. But tax-free is not always a very good idea. And I mentioned this to the government of Kurdistan, KRG, but of course, we'll see how things change. I have a question from the gentleman. Please make your question brief, no comments, otherwise I'll cut you off, because last time, you next.
I can say a comment. in the form of a question, I can play around.
I will cut you off because last time
yes.
we have to, and I would like more
sir.
Students in the back.
Thank you, sir, very much. Thank you.
Sure.
My question is addressed to Mr. Faruk Rasul, and I'll speak in Arabic. أنت يا سيدي سمعت عنك الكثير، فعرفت أنك علم من أعلام الاقتصاد السليماني بل والكردستاني وربما العراقي أيضا. سمعت الكثير عن خلقك واهتمامك بالشباب وبالرعية وبالناس. فسؤالي هو: أنت استثمرت اقتصاديا في هذا البلد، ألا تظن أن الاستثمار في الموارد البشرية له نفس الأهمية؟ ونحن نجلس بين ظهراني جامعة تخرج العديد من الطلبة الذين هم عماد المستقبل. هل فكرتم بمشاريع صغيرة تنمي هذه القابليات؟ شكرا لكم سيدي. شكرا.
الحقيقة الاهتمام بالموارد البشرية اهتمام يجب أن الجميع يهتمون بالموارد البشرية. العراق يملك الموارد البشرية بشكل كبير أو هائل، موزع بين الداخل والأكثرية في الخارج. بالنسبة الجامعة كمثل أو كمثال، الجامعة الأمريكية، أنا شخصيا ولنا زملاء آخرين جالسين هنا نتعاون وتعاوننا مع الجامعة الأمريكية باعتبارها جهة مهمة لنشوء جيل جديد، سواء من تعلم اللغة أو العلوم المختلفة. الموارد البشرية تنشأ وتطور بالتأكيد، وله الأهمية الكبيرة. من الممكن القيام بأعمال مالية فاينانسينج لأي مشروع، من الممكن الشراء، من الممكن وكل شيء، وكمبيوتر كأحدث شيء إذا البشر هو اللي يصنعه وهو اللي يطوره. بالتأكيد إلى أهمية كبيرة، وهالجامعة أنشئت كجزء من إيجاد وتربية الجيل آخر للموارد البشرية. ونحن في شركاتنا بالتأكيد نرى أهمية الموارد البشرية. الموارد البشرية هنا بالنسبة لنا، أنا تكلمت عن خطوات في بناء مشاريعنا. استنجدنا بموارد بشرية أجنبية ذات خبرة عالية، وأنشأنا بجانبها مراكز تدريب وممارسة للكادر الوطني لخلق كادر جديد. ونحن أتصور كعراق ككل أيضا توجد هذا التطور، وهذا شيء مهم بالتأكيد.
كاك فاروق، إيش كم عامل عندك حاليا يشتغل لشركات فاروق جروب؟
شركات اللي أنا مساهم بها أو أملكها أو مساهم بها مباشرة وغير مباشرة في حدود 30,000 شخص.
هذا اللي دا قصده بالبرايفت انفستمنت. السؤال هنا.
أنا رحمن غريب، مدير مركز ميترو للدفاع عن حقوق الصحفيين في الإقليم. سؤالي هو الأستاذ كاك فاروق. كاك فاروق، أنتم تستثمرون في العديد من القطاعات، ولكن لم نرى استثماراتكم في القطاع الإعلامي، على الرغم من متابعتنا نحن كصحفيين وكمركز لدعمكم للإعلام الحر. وأتمنى الزملاء المشاركون أيضا يعطون رأيهم حول قضية الاستثمار في المجال الإعلامي في العراق. ما هو رأيكم؟ شكرا جزيلا.
تجاوي دمو.
المساهمة في الإعلام بالتأكيد مساهمة لها دور كبير في تقدم المجتمع ككل، خاصة الإعلام المحترم. وبالتأكيد جنابك تشتغل في مجالات إعلامية محترمة. نحن كشركات وبالذات آسيا سيل نتعامل مع الصحافة وجميع مجالات الإعلام بالمساهمة والمساعدة، وفي كل العراق جميع الفضائيات، جميع محطات الراديو وجميع الجرائد المحترمة. مرة أخرى أقول فيها إعلانات أكثر من حاجتنا لنشر الإعلانات، وإنما كمساعدة للصحافة الحرة.
Talking about media is never a good investment. so talking coldly, it's not a good thing to invest in. I don't know if he's a student or... Please introduce yourself. Yes.
Aman Jarwaisi from Dubai Chamber of Commerce. We recently opened an office in January in Erbil as a representation office, and on a weekly basis we get contacted by Emirati companies that want to invest here. There's already a significant amount of Emirati investment, even though the number of companies are small. One of the main issues that I deal with on a daily basis is market data, the transparency of information in Iraq, in the Kurdistan region, population figures, trade numbers, numbers of companies that are registered in the region in different sectors. I'm very interested to, especially to Mr. Philip Khoury from your investment consultancy. How do you gain access to this information? I saw that you had some sources there, the IMF, the World Bank, but I also deal with some certain sources, and sometimes figures are not consistent. You can get one figure from one ministry, you can get a different figure from another ministry. So in your daily operations and in your advisory, and actually I want to, this question to
actually that's a very good question. We publish reports also. There is no real statistics office that has kept a lot of statistics, but I'll ask Philip, how do you get numbers?
Actually, the regulator is very good. They have a single website where all the financial statements of all the listed companies are actually available. It's in Arabic, of course. It'd be great if it'd be in Arabic and English, so it'd be a more level playing field, but at least they exist, right? So this is for company-specific information. So actually, the regulator is doing that right, okay? I mean, banking sector data is always the most reliable in any emerging market, right? Because the central bank has access to it. So any financial, any banking sector related or balance of payments type data is available through the central bank website. Although I have to admit, it is published very late. So, for example, 2012 information only became available in the final quarter of 2013. So the lag should really be 2 months. It shouldn't be 9 months, but it's there.
I will come up front. We have some time, but are there any students in the back who want to ask questions? Okay, the lady, yes? Or the two ladies?
Hello. My question is that Iraq is a very open market, and we import a lot of products. So my question is basically, why don't we put finished products in our own country instead of importing so many products?
So what do you mean? Why don't we produce in our own country?
Yes. Especially oil. We can so many products.
The problem is not importing products. I think a consumer, those of us who believe in open markets, a consumer should have access to the cheapest product available at the quality available. The problem is we have no control over the borders for the quality of products entering the market. Today, the chicken available in Baghdad, we do none of that because we're doing a study on it. A lot of it is contaminated, expired, arrives from Brazil, Ukraine, Turkey, Iran. No one to stop it. It's not the price. It's the quality that has to be checked. But as a consumer, you should be able to buy the most competitive product on the market.
Thank you.
One more student. That's a student. That guy.
My name is Sakar Shadala, and I have a question for Mr. Faruk. When he said that AsiaCell was created by him and some of his friends and some people who helped him to establish AsiaCell, were there political parties in it by establishing AsiaCell, or did he create it by himself and his friends? And is it nowadays also available, or is it nowadays, is someone able to produce or establish another phone sector as well? Thank you.
ترجمة كمت.
Thank you. Loyal Khatib, my question to Ziad, Badr, we saw from the chart of risks that power generation, availability of electricity poses significant challenge to investors. And this possibly explains one of the challenges that Esra mentioned in terms of like the power supply. Maybe I would add to that is the availability of competitive feedstock to sustain any investment locally. My question is, it's nothing to do with the actual financial things, it's to do with the population. Iraq's population growth is growing about 3.1% per annum. By 2030, Iraq's population will reach around 55 million from the 33 million now. Surely Iraq cannot kill the unemployment by its current tactics, which is building up on unemployment, mass unemployment in the public sector. Otherwise, we will be bankrupt by 2020. Do you think that the current bureaucracies and policies will eventually create some sort of public unrest because of increasing unemployment beyond 2020 that could eventually threaten businesses, especially in the private sector? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I think when we started this session, we were talking about the role of the private sector to create the jobs. Unfortunately, the mentality in Iraq is a mentality of dependence on the public sector. Even the private businessmen try to survive on tenders from the public sector. I think a change of mentality is really needed. If you want really to create jobs to absorb the high level of unemployment in Iraq, you need to let the private sector operate and you need to support the private sector. And I'll take this question also to answer the other question about availability of data, because this is also important. It is a serious challenge. If I want to invest in hotel or in cement, I want to do a market study. Where do you get the data? Unfortunately, so far, we have to do it the hard way. We have to collect our own data. So the existence of centers like where we are right now, the American University, where you could have researchers work on specific areas and try to have this type of data available for investors in different type of sectors that will help attract investors. Knowledge is power. If you don't have it, investors will not be able to come.
I'll have to take two more questions. The gentleman here has been raising his hand for a long time, and he looks like a new face.
Thanks. My name is Khoury Sarani. Obviously, Kurdistan and Iraq, in generally speaking, going through central command economy to the market economy, and there's an important role and to play for the private sector, obviously. But what we have seen the last 10 years, it's actually an open market in the way that there's no infrastructure in investment at all in this country, and our market became an open market to the worst, cheapest quality of products.
We discussed that.
Yes. My point is that I believe that's still there's important role for the government to play in building the infrastructure. That's the first question. Second question is addressing to Mr. Ziad and Philip Group. While you do investment in this area, would you look at toward corruption, democracy, human rights, investment, or that's the issues is really not concerning to you what's going on in the area? Thank you.
Ziad.
Well, as I mentioned, when we look at at any investment, okay, we really take into consideration everything related to respecting not only international law, but also local law. So when we are looking at investing with an Iraqi investor, we have to take into consideration all of this. We look if there is violation when it comes to child labor. We look at, as I mentioned, if you're talking about corruption, this is why we need to check about the source of wealth of the investor we are dealing with. So we really do our due diligence before we get involved. And this is a challenge. This is why we're not able to dump billions of dollars in investment in Iraq, because every investment takes us on average between a year to a year and a half to do the appraisal, to do it the right way before we are able to really disperse the funds.
I'm sorry, although we plead democracy, once we get down a bit, it's all dictatorships. The dictator of this place told me to stop. So Kag Barham just ordered us to stop. Okay, so you're asking for. Okay, there is a beautiful lady over there. I have to give the floor to the beautiful lady. She's been like standing up along. Okay. Huh? Yes. Okay.
Thanks for this compliment. My name is Hajan Kamanshali. I'm representing Identity Center from Jordan, working in social and political development. I have two questions, one for Kag Faruk and one for the panel. My question for Kag Faruk is, how did you manage to do all these great projects without having a banking system in the region? And my question to the panel is, why do you think KRG is not developing banking system or banking sector as it does for oil and gas sector? Thank you.
For the first question, I will let Kag Faruk answer himself. How can he do it without a banking system? For the second question, I have the same one, and they don't answer me.
الحقيقة أنا أعتقد أن الإرادة عند الإنسان شيء مهم في تكوين شخصيته وفي ممارسته للأعمال وفي كل الأعمال، سواء الأعمال الصناعية، خدمات، والأعمال السياسية أيضا. إرادة الإنسان القوي المؤمن بشعبه بالذات والمؤمن بالمستقبل. كثير من الناس يتكلمون على أن وشركاتنا جميع أعمالنا داخل البلد ولا نملك شيء في الخارج، فمهتمون ببناء البلد. بالنسبة للنظام المصرفي توجد مصارف بالعراق، والنظام المصرفي الحكومي ضعيف نوعا ما في كردستان لقطع علاقة بنوك الحكومية الرافدين والرشيد سابقا بالحكومة المركزية، وهذا كان خطأ كلش كبير من حكومة الإقليم. ودائما أنا دعيت إلى إعادة العلاقات، لأن هالبنوك أتى أنظمة جيدة وأتهم أموال كثيرة وكبيرة، من الممكن كان ولا يزال من الممكن الاهتمام بهذا الجانب وإعادة العلاقات بين مصارف بغداد ومصارف كردستان. على العموم المصرف العراقي للتجارة حاليا يلعب دور كبير، ويوجد بعض المصارف الأهلية يلعبون دور ليس كبير. أكثر المصارف الموجودة في العراق هي كصرافين صرافين لتحويل المال من بالداخل وبالخارج، ويربحون فقط من هذه العملية اللي الحقيقة هي مو عملية صيرفية أو عملية مصرفية على طريق الصحيح.
Does that answer your question? As for the KRG, as I said, I don't know the answer because they're not answering me. Dr. Barham, I don't know. I think we're going to stop here. You're more than welcome to talk to the panelists. We have another exciting panel after this. It's about Turkey, and I have a personal issue there. So you listen to me tentatively. Now you have to listen to my wife.